And David will talk about that when we get to that item, Chair, and public excluded. So I'll leave it there and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lance. Appreciate the transparency and openness. That's great. Do you have questions for Lance at this stage? Dave?
I'm just wondering if in your induction plan you're going to be training elected members how to deal with staff.
I think, Councillor Dave, that'll come up, and unfortunately we won't have people with your experience to help train them either. So.
Rob, you've got a question, please.
Yeah, just a quick question. Thanks for the detailed report, Lance. Just around the paragraph 16 and the change in voting to STV, and just feedback I'm getting from the community about potential confusion over that change. How are you happy that we've got in place a good plan that will manage any challenges or risks that come about as a result of that change? And the reason I'm asking that is that there's two sets of voting papers in the envelope. One uses one method, another uses another, and you know, my concern is that we might end up with lots of invalid papers to elections in the past, which have been pretty small in terms of percentage of voters.
Look, I think that is a risk, and what we've been doing is Dan Silverton, the comms team, working with Sean Hickey, we have a education / communication program on that, and I think that was recirculated in the past few weeks. I'll get Sean to comment, but I think educating people around STV is something which we've put some emphasis on, but I think you do point out a very valid challenge we have around people understanding Hamilton City Council's way of voting versus obviously Waikato Regional Council. So I think we can do as much as we can. I'd have to say the Waikato Times have been quite helpful in that space, and some of the local newspapers, and I think when you have STV, it's about how do you keep that the messaging as simple as possible so people can understand it. The thing that's coming through, and I know Mayor Paul has passed on some comments from some ratepayers to me, and other elected members have as well, that some people are now asking around, once the votes are in, how are the quotas set, you know, for that threshold under STV. So that's where we need to just make sure we've got good Q&As so that we can respond to those people asking those questions. And I think it probably is those nuances where we need to be nimble and agile and quick to actually be able to answer those questions for people. I'll let Sean maybe fill in some gaps.
Thank you, Lance, and thank you, Chair Bruce. The only thing I was going to add was that the STV does have the potential. You know, there's a change, and but the campaign that we're running, I think, is as good a mitigation as we could possibly do. And the thing I was just going to mention was that some other councils have picked up on our material around STV, and they're now using the material that we produced to explain STV to their constituents. So I think Rotorua was the latest, who have actually had STV for already, but they've picked up on our campaign as well to explain it to their residents. So I guess it's just some assurance that we are doing as good a job possible, I think, of explaining that to voters.
Have we got a plan B in case at the time of the rollout, because I think it will all happen when the envelopes go out? Have we got a plan B in place that, you know, we could get to the voters reasonably quickly if there are adverse or there is confusion when residents come to vote?
Yeah, as I said, we can be agile about putting out announcements through the media. Look, they're quite sympathetic to that. Our local media are quite supportive of local democracy, and Sean's team and others have a good relationship with Jonathan McKenzie at the Times, etc. So I think we can do that, and we can also change the material on our website and other fora quite quickly, so that if there's any particular issues happening, we can respond to those really quickly and give those answers and steer it in the right direction.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Oh, sorry, Maxine. Yes, thank you. I appreciate you putting your hand up because I've got to keep looking this way to see if somebody's after me. So, Jadine, you're next. Thank you.
Our new chair / deputy. Thanks, Lance. And just to follow up from Rob's question with regard to options for people to be able to take their vote into somewhere. I understand that it's going to be at libraries, at our council reception. Will those staff also be getting some extensive training on answering questions and being able to guide residents on how to vote, not who to vote for, but the voting process?
Yes, so in each of those areas we'll have a, if you want to call it a subject matter expert, who has the relevant information, who understands it, who can actually talk to anyone who might have some verbal questions rather than just sort of giving them a pamphlet or something like that, so, or steering them towards our website. So we'll make sure that those people are in place, and you probably know Michelle's Kerber's team downstairs, they're pretty good. Rebecca's team at the library, they're very adaptable and they're very aware of the electoral process that's happening at the moment and the changes.
And will we be offering some additional resource in order to be able to potentially be aware of the need or the demand from residents? Because potentially they'll be asking for a replacement voting paper as well, and to be sure that we have enough of those on hand to meet that need?
Yeah, look, we won't be putting new people in or anything like that. What would, you know, we've got pretty talented people in the libraries and our customer service centre, so they basically get from Mish's team, they'll get the right training, information, and making sure they've got the right you know, papers and things like that, so they can actually talk to the people around that. So we don't think we need any extra resource for that. It's just it'll be a particular focus for those subject matter experts in those places.
But if we need, or we see the need, we've got the resource to be able to...
Yeah, we'd shift people across, and the libraries team now, the way that they're structured, they can actually shift across libraries and that sort of thing. So we sort of don't just have people working in Chartwell, you know, quite often they're in 2 library hubs and that sort of thing, so we can move people across. And we've done that during COVID when we've been short of staff and that sort of thing, and it works quite well.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Maxine. Jadine, and then Paula.
Just respond to a certain extent in relation to Dave's comment. So it's not just around developing healthy relationships with staff, but also with each other. So fingers crossed for that. In terms of a less flippant point, I know that there'll be a steep learning curve as new councillors come on board, and I recognise that they will have a lot of information that they need to go through. And I'm just, and I know that you will already be across this, but I just want to make a plug for He Pau Manawa and making sure that that is prioritised too, as one of the pieces of document, or one of the documents that the councillors have a robust induction in relation to. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Just to comment on that, yes, that's part of that. And I think the 2-day hui will be about getting to know each other and each other's personas, how we roll. It won't be kumbaya and sticky notes, because we know elected members don't like that, but it will be about talking about all those key influences that shape the way that we work. And I'll even talk about what we've been doing with staff around our new mission, purpose, vision and values from an organisational point of view, and obviously elected members, you know, will be talking about how they want to roll as a team as well. So I think there'll be a real good opportunity to talk about that. We've got a really good facilitator too, organised.
Thank you. Paula.
Just 2 things. Firstly, you were talking about the staff and the impact of the long, wet winter, etc. Because there's election time, all of us here would have been exposed to people's concerns around the state of weeds and roundabout, etc., berms. potholes, lots of concern about the state of streets. And I have been saying to them in reply that there have been some staffing issues over the winter with staff being off, with COVID, plus the wet weather being unsuitable to do the activity sometime. Are we expecting to see some of those delayed works addressed now that we're in spring?
Yeah, and Mayor Paula, hasn't just been our own staff, it's been contractors as well, as you're pretty well aware. So as we get out of, you know, sort of the cold and flu season, then the absenteeism will be less, but there will be a reprioritisation of work programs, and then there'll also be discussions with you know, the Infrastructure Alliance and that sort of thing around catch-up and how we do that. So there will be the continuous thing that we do is around reprioritising workloads and that sort of thing. And if we've made promises to people about fixing a pothole, you know, we've gone back through antenna or whatever and said that, you know, it's going to take 2 months, but now it's going to take 4 months. Those things we will follow up on. So it's just a matter of catch-up. And I think the key thing is that people will have to be a little bit patient. But once the fine weather comes, then you'll find that things speed up quite quickly, and you won't have the downside with staff and that sort of thing. If we've saved money, then we can always ask the contractors to, you know, put some more staff on and some more crews and that sort of thing, and then, you know, they can get ahead of the game.
It's a bit unlikely though, isn't it, with cost escalation for asphalt and all that? Have we saved any money? Do we know that? Does anybody know?
Sorry, what was that?
Have we saved any money? Or could we know whether we've saved any money at some point?
Yeah, well...
Because I know costs have gone up, and especially in construction, they've gone up humongously.
Yeah, look, I can't tell you offhand, but if you start looking at the financial reports, especially, you know, that we're 2 or 3 months into the financial year, you'll start seeing that. Traditionally, we start seeing OPEX and CAPEX ramping up over the drier season.
Okay, so and then on to the STV question, because we're going to quite a few meetings at the moment, over 30 of them probably. At those meetings, apart from the candidates taking their own collateral and whoever's organising it, there's very little there on STV. One we went to yesterday usefully showed the video, but I was wondering if there were like posters or other easy collateral that should be up at all the community houses, should be up at all where the meetings are taking place, with the 1-2, because I fear spoiled votes will be higher than ever before. Are we going to do anything like that, or in terms of working with the event organisers too? So, because that video is quite good with the apples and pears and what have you. But it would be good if all event organisers were able to show that, or if they haven't got like a video, they could show the poster. Because honestly, this is the papers are on Thursday, so it's coming at us really quick, and people are going to make errors quite quickly on their form.
Yeah, I'll take that offline and work with Sean's team around that. So, and if it's not having it, it's a good suggestion. So, thanks for that.
Thanks.
We're still talking on this item. I do want to check, I think everybody's had a crack. Mark, welcome to here. Kieran, is there anything that you would want to question or raise at this stage?
No, thanks.
Thanks, Kieran. Okay, that being the case, can we just move then, thank you, Lance, appreciate that. Can we just move then to the recommendation that the Strategic Risk and Assurance Committee receives a report? I'll move in a second. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Jadine. Any discussion on the motion? There being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you. If we can move on to item 7, please, which is the Safety and Wellness Report. Welcome, you guys. Good to see you again. So, Dan, as always, I'm conscious Kieran's great words. You can assume we've read the report. So, please, those things that might be salient, otherwise I'll get councillors' questions going.
All right. Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity. We'll take the report as read, but just wanted to quickly highlight just some of the progress that we've made over this quarter. SMS, our safety management system, is up and now available. We've made great progress, and with the introduction of our safety software Aura, so that was operational at the beginning of August. July. We've made good progress around the safety reset and the strategic programs, and you'll note and evidence the progress we've made and the status on page 2. So there's certainly been some really good progress in respect of those strategic programs, and we're happy to pause there and answer any questions regarding the report.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. Karen, you're first off, please.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I was just wanting a little more context around a couple of things. So firstly, the CoLab, which is, I understand, a collaboration between councils. Can you just give us a wee bit more information on that? How often do you meet? What sort of collaboration comes out of that?
Sure, actually, I'll let Marie Snowball talk to that, who sits on the committee or the working group for CoLab.
Thank you. So, yeah, health and safety managers from around the region join that group. We're currently meeting every 3 months. However, recently we have got together a little bit more frequently than that because there's a number of new members on there, so we're trying to understand the value that it brings to council. But more importantly, what our focus is, Kieran, is on some key projects of work that as councils we all have a vested interest in, and we have prioritised some of those. So it was interesting to hear you there talk about the elective member inductions, and that is a priority for the group, knowing that elections are upon us and that we'll have a number of new members coming into the play. So we will be working on that as a collective, because we've decided as a group we're probably, don't need to reinvent the wheel. We're all facing the same challenges, I guess, in terms of how we need to go about that and do it. So collectively as a group it's really working quite well, and that's the aim in terms of those main projects.
Great to hear that you're not all reinventing the same wheel, which is good. Hey, and if I might, Bruce, Chair, just a couple of other questions. Firstly, the first is not a question but a statement. Hey, fabulous to see that progress on page 57 of the pack against the state of safety recommendations. It looks like there's been a lot of work done there between April and July, so well done. I did just have a question around the bow tie work, and so that's to be effectively contracted out, and I just wondered how that works given the knowledge held by subject matter experts within council, and whether there will be true ownership of that really important work.
Sorry, Kieran, it won't be contracted out. We are engaging Coachio Group to come into council on the 1st to 3rd of November to take us through the bow tie methodology against our 13 critical risks. What we've also leveraged off for the moment, we're currently working with them towards that. We've given them all the work that's actually been done in the past from previous stakeholders within council, and those bow ties are getting put together, and then we'll be working particularly with project teams within council. We have to have people involved that are actually working in those critical risk areas. So all Coachio Group will be doing is helping us to facilitate that process, get the bow tie software in place, and then for us to put improvement plans in so we can keep effectively checking in with actually what we say we've got to prevent an incident happening. We have got in place and put improvement plans in to make sure we keep it alive. So there is a strong emphasis on people, our workers fundamentally, and also more importantly our GMs having been accountable to and associated to those risks, so it's leader-led as well.
Yeah, oh, that's great to hear. I misunderstood the report, so that there's a facilitation role only. So that's really good to hear. And my last question, if I may, Chair, is around the state of safety gap analysis. What's the next step in that process? is there to be a sort of a self-assessment, and then when is the next external assessment?
Yeah, look, I think for us it's about making sure we've got our house in order. So important for us to do our own self-assessments, which sits really neatly under the assurance pillar of our SMS. And as we work our way through that and I guess increase our maturity and confidence, we would look to engage with an external person to come and test our system and reassess whether that's Safe Plus or whether that's another formal type audit. We'll look to determine that. But what we are doing is working towards the ISO standards and holding that up as our benchmark. And so all the work, initiatives and progress we're working towards today are taking us to that point.
So when do you expect that external assessment to take place?
Can I answer?
Yeah.
So for the moment, we've only introduced earlier this year our framework with the SMS and aligning it to ISO 45001. We need to embed that for at least 12 months and making sure that we're then consistent across the business with everything we're trying to do. I would then see our team doing internal audits to make sure that we're meeting those requirements and then going out externally after that. So I would probably say early to mid-year, and it may be at that stage that we might consider actually applying for accreditation under ISO 45001, at which time not only will we get an audit, but we can meet those accreditation standards.
Right, thank you.
Folk would like to ask the team here today on the report? Comfortable? Great. Can we move to the, that's great. The fact that the reporting, as we've talked over the tronium, has really improved lots, Dan and Marie, so consequently it's very clear, and I just want to reiterate Kieran's view. Well done on particularly the program of improvement that's been going in place, and your focusing on that, that's giving me as a member of the committee a lot more confidence that we are, well, our feet are not of clay, hopefully, but actually got some substance underneath it, which is superb. Can I move to the recommendation then, please, which is that we receive the report, and we recommend that Council receives the Safety and Wellness Report 1 May through 31 July. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Maxine. Thank you, Jadine. Any question on the motion? If there none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? It's carried. Sorry, should I be asking to raise hands here? There's always different ways of doing it. I should know myself. I've sat in the room enough times.
I should just double check. Me just raising my hand like that, does that work for you, Nora?
That's very helpful. I will ask to raise hands. Thank you. I'll correct myself going forward. It makes a lot of sense. Okay. We're into item number 8, which is the risk management report. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to highlight key points from the risk management report taken as read, starting on page 58 of your agenda. As you know, the report focuses on our strategic and organisational risks and contains a lot of detail about these. The following key points I wish to briefly highlight will cover significant changes since the last report presented in June. As you're aware from the last committee workshop held in June at the Genesis building, risk names and descriptions have been reviewed and updated. This is the first risk management report presented to the committee with these updated risk names and descriptions. You'll recall the descriptions are now all worded consistently. This has made it easier to understand each risk. Essentially, the wording has been fine-tuned to provide clarity and focus the conversations. As a result of these more focused conversations, 2 risks have seen an increase in residual risk rating from high to very high this last quarter. Important to note, though, is that neither increase is due to changing external factors. Details relating to these increased residual risk ratings can be found in paragraph 59, page 63, and paragraph 79, page 65. Shield, Council's online risk management system, has been successfully rolled out across the organisation. Shield enables staff to manage and mitigate risks effectively and efficiently. A focus of the rollout has been on improving our risk culture and ensuring the system is user-friendly. This focus has seen increased engagement with risk management, more thoughtful risk and resilience conversations, and more responsibility and accountability across the business. The risk register attached to today's report is the first extracted directly from Shield. You may have noticed there are one or two formatting issues to be sorted out. Overall, though, it is a significant improvement from the previous, more manual process for updating the risk register. With local government elections taking place on the 8th of October and ongoing central government reforms, Strategic Risk 6, which is political changes negatively impact our strategic direction, remains in the spotlight. You'll find details around that one on between paragraphs 45 to 51 on page 62. You'll see significant progress has been made in the climate change space this last quarter, with the policy adopted by Council in June, followed by Council's approval of the Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan in August. Paragraphs 65 to 69, page 64 provide further detail. The recent extreme weather event in Nelson shows how inextricably linked Strategic Risk 9, which is our failure to adapt to climate change, and Strategic Risk 1, a failure to respond to a disaster, actually are. A new feature to this report, under Emerging Risks, paragraph 81, pages 65 to 66, intends to provide reassurance the global risk landscape is being monitored and that our risks are indeed representative of what's happening globally. I can confirm risk owners and their delegated representatives are present and available to take any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. That's very helpful and insightful. I appreciate that. Members, do we have questions for Jane or Mish as they sit here, or indeed the owners? Sorry, Rob, I think you're first.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the report. And is it the result of rolling out the Shield software a reason why risks 3 and risk 8 have moved in the last quarter?
Not for Strategic Risk 8, more so for organisational risk 3, a failure of critical assets. And that is because we added some new risk categories to that particular risk. So yeah, that's the...
So as Shield gets a little more mature in terms of its use in the organisation, is it likely that some of the other risks the residual risks might move from where they are currently to a situation where they're in a worse situation?
Quite possibly, because it is enabling us to have those more focused conversations. Yeah, it is a possibility, absolutely.
Okay. No, I'm pleased that we've got something like that in the organisation. Now, in terms of, you know, I mean, when we look at these risks, we've got words of very high and catastrophic, and they can be interpreted quite differently in the marketplace than we might and you might interpret them here. Do you think, given those two risks having increased and the number of residual risks that we have as high or very high, that there should be some reporting done to the whole of council rather than the reporting in detail of this to this committee, which of course is only a smaller group of elected members?
We will be reporting regularly to the council. We take this report up currently 6 monthly. I think as you've noted, Councillor, as we work through the implementation of Shield, we'll be refining how we look at these. And at the moment, the way that Shield works is it takes the highest risk rating of perhaps one facet that belongs with the strategic risk. So,
so it looks at one, and if one is very high, then it rates the whole of the category as very high. I see, okay.
So I think
can we tone it down a bit?
We'll be looking quite carefully at what those drivers are and whether they're reflective of the entire risk. But Shield is certainly allowing us to have those valuable conversations about why we've got a risk rating the way we do. So it's certainly an evolving process.
Okay, and if we did report this back to council, is there a, and I'm not wanting to undermine other councillors who are not here today, but is there a better way to explain some of this than the way that it is here? Because it is quite technical, isn't it, in terms of the outcomes and how you might interpret those outcomes, when in fact, you know, catastrophic meaning here could be quite different to the way that it might be interpreted elsewhere.
Sure. We have set definitions for each of the ratings within our risk framework, but we are looking at how we induct our new strategic risk committee members, assuming there is a committee, the other side of the elections, and also how we induct the council as a whole into the risk topic.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Chair.
that. I've got Karen, then Jadine.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, firstly, I would say good report. Thank you very much. It's great to see Shield rolled out, albeit with a couple of teething issues. And it was really good to see out of those 28 risk treatment actions I think there was 28 completed and 9 new ones. So it's really good to see that there's some ongoing progress being made. The reframing of the risks, I think, does clarify, the triggers and the impacts. Risk management is an evolving process, and I very much see the next step in the process is around assurance. So we've identified and narrated our risks. We've looked at what are the triggers and what are the controls, and the next step is to measure the robustness of the controls and continually monitor that. And so in that, with that in mind, this time round, I spent quite a bit of time looking at those controls, and I do have some feedback on some controls that, I'm sort of, from the outside, I'm aware that they are there, but they don't seem to be listed in the controls. So, Chair Bruce, I'm not sure whether you want me to go through each of those or take that offline.
Look, perhaps a split answer to that one, Karen. If any related to any, if any of you thought was worthwhile raising right now, I would encourage you to do that. Otherwise, for the greater detail, yes, I do suggest you go offline. Are there any that are significant that should be raised?
There are just a couple that I think might be useful in this forum. And the first is on page 72, and that relates to a disaster. And one of the risk causes is civil unrest. And I think that is quite an important topic at the moment. It came out really loud and clear in the World Economic Forum annual risk report, which noted a growth and spread of extremism, which, leads to more vandalism and, potential terrorism and what have you. And we've seen it here in New Zealand on Parliament grounds. And so, thinking about that civil unrest, it seems to me that one of the really important controls is physical security measures, whether that be bollards, around council facilities or, passenger egress and things like that. But it just didn't seem that it was listed as one of the existing controls. So that's an illustration of some of the things that I've been looking at, but I'm happy to talk to you about that offline. And there was just one item on page 77. Whilst we need to have a really robust and thorough risk management system, which includes the treatment plans when it comes to cybersecurity, obviously we need to be careful what we put in documents. So I understand for that one, it will need to continue to be high level. and we just need to make sure we've got that balance right. That's it from me. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Kieran. Appreciate that. Jodine.
Stealing my points, Karen, I appreciate it. So I just wanted to reiterate great progress and also excellent summary, Julie, thank you for that. And further to Karen's point, I think it was more around getting a deeper level of assurance that the mitigations that we have in place are actually going to mitigate the risks that we do state there. So I do think there's a lot more work that we could do in that space. And further to Rob's point as well, in terms of the risk management policy, does it outline at what stage risks need to be reported directly to council?
It does.
And so that may pick up on what you're talking about, Rob. So if it says if it's at very high, then it should go directly to council in some way, shape or form. So nothing further from me. Kia ora. Great work, team. Thank you,
Jodine. Any other questions? I do have one question, if that's okay, and it was indeed following on from Rob's question around what effectively is the recalibration of those two risks. It actually leads to a recalibration of our residual risk, so it does raise the question, do we need to change our mitigations? And that's what I was perhaps missing there. If it's reporting risk and it says the residual risk has gone up, even if it's recalibrated, it still suggests that we should be looking at the mitigations. So I'd like, I don't quite get the answer out of this, so I perhaps would just like to reflect for a future reporting. Good, I like it, the progress we're making, but it still begs the question, it's gone up relative to other things, do we need to be doing something? I'm taking from the meeting at the moment, the assumption is that what we are doing in terms of controls is adequate to manage both those risks at this stage, but it just leaves that, you know, it's the problem of colours and grades and arrows. If it's going up, I say, well, should we not be doing something about it? But I think you're telling me at this stage, no, we need to get the system perfected and recalibrated right. Correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Brilliant. Thank you. Any other questions? Can I move then, please, to the recommendations? Just need to find what page are we on, sorry?
Page 58.
58, thank you. Sorry, it's just there we go. That we received the report. That was a big recommendation. Can I move that from the chair? Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Jodine. Is there any discussion on the motion? There being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh, raise your hand. Yes, please. Kieran, I'm sure, is raising their hand as well. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Look, as a good chair, I need to say that we're not going to meet our 10:30 break. We need to keep going till I suspect around about 11, if that's okay. So as long as members are happy that they've just about done an hour's work, I think we need to do an hour and a half before we contemplate a break. Right, if we could move then into the PDUB's, or PwC, sorry. It's a bit informal, isn't it, Matt? PDUB's Internal Audit Update Report. Thank you. Welcome, you guys.
Thanks, Bruce. We take the report as read. Just note on the status paper that some of the engagements in the internal audit plan have been updated, which is in the attached, where vendor analytics has moved forward to be reported at the next meeting in December, and the payroll processes and delegations to positions has moved out accordingly. This report covers cybersecurity phase 2, which is in the PX, which we'll cover later, and business continuity, contractor health and safety, and contract KPI pieces of work. We do note that the contracts health and safety audits and the contract KPIs were both in Morva's audit plan, but they were covered by ourselves.
Thanks for that. Do we have any questions on this report? A big green report on all the projects, basically on track, which is great, but there is also the results, indeed, as you said, of Morva's what started, but you guys have obviously finished. I've got Karen first. Thank you. Karen?
Yep, thank you. Just on Morva, I'd like to hear more on the plan to replace Morva or to restructure the internal audit function within HCC, which complements PwC's work. is there someone there that can, it may well be David, if you could just confirm your current position on that, and then I've probably got some supplementary questions on that.
Thank you, Kieran. I'll start off, and Tracy may back me up with some further detail. But with Morva moving to another role within council, we took the opportunity to review the internal audit function, and there were some assignments that could be taken up by PwC, but a lot more that could be done within our own existing staff. So rather than having a one-person show in terms of internal audit, it was leveraging the skills of our members of our finance team, noting at least 3 of our members of the finance team ex-Audit New Zealand and have great competency around audits. So we're looking to share those out, not only as a sharing the workload, but also giving those members of the finance team greater exposure and variety in what they do.
Okay, and so I would just like to question around independence capacity, using existing finance staff members, notwithstanding that they may have previous audit experience. I just wonder, firstly, do they have the capacity, and will this work be prioritised? And secondly, what do we do when there is a conflict? And I can imagine that would arise reasonably regularly if they're auditing systems that they're implementing themselves.
Yeah, great question. So firstly, the internal audit work is a conversation piece that we regularly talk to PwC about, and if there were any audits that some of the finance team would undertake, they would have to be within council, which wasn't anywhere near their span or scope of control. And so in other words, those projects are agreed with PwC and then shared out. There isn't a lot, and we talk about audits in a sense of a 3-month period, and whilst the finance team are very busy, it does allow time for the finance staff to actually spend time doing an audit within that 3-month cycle. And I know Tracy works hard with the team to make sure that we cover off all our deadlines and what we need to do. So yeah, I'm not concerned about capacity at this stage.
Okay, notwithstanding that it was a full-time role for Morva.
Tracy's looking like she might add in some points here.
Thanks. Yes, it was, but a lot of that work that she was doing in her internal audit role is actually what she's in the newly created role that she's in now. So from my perspective of all the pieces of work that she was doing, that probably is the area that would be more of my concern. So obviously PwC are picking up some of those extra pieces of work as well as my own team. This was a trial just for the next wee while to see if it is going to work or not. It's certainly not not black and white. If it's not working and the team's not capable of picking up, or PwC is not capable of picking up the work program that we had put together, then I will certainly relook at it and bring in a full-time person again if that's what we need to do. So I just didn't want to rush into everything with the business moving so much at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, and it would be good to perhaps you note that it's a trial. It would be good to proactively consider this issue, I think, when we look at next year's internal audit plan.
Absolutely.
Just to see that we've got the structure right. And the one last question I've got on that point is around the oversight of the improvement, the organisational improvement register, which tracks all of the recommendations from various audits. To get the value out of those audits, we need to monitor the implementation of those recommendations, and that was previously Morva was charged with that. Is there anybody that now has that responsibility?
Yes, one of, as you heard David say before, I have 3 external Audit New Zealand staff in my team, and one of them, that is their role, and she is the one that's actually written the report for me today.
Great, thank you. Chair, I do have some questions on the individual internal audit reports, but I'll hand back to you for others to ask questions on the general report.
Yes, thank you. I realise that, and I'd like to, before we get to that, give Aaron and Matt a chance just to comment on the the two big substantive reports. Rob, was there any question you wanted, or do you want to go straight to the? Right. Why don't we? Is that the same for you, Jadine? So why don't we just get any of the overview from you folk on the big reports, and then we open it up for questions. Rob first, then Jadine, and then Karen.
Sure, thanks, Chair. Just cover the business continuity report first. Obviously, business continuity is part of the overall resilience management framework, which Council is in the process of refreshing. Want to emphasise that there is a base level of business continuity already existing in place. But I guess there's a reliance on a very people-focused approach in terms of response to business continuity at the moment, and a reliance on individuals, which presents a key risk if they're not available. And also a very siloed approach, whereas it needs some more organisation-wide context to be put into, and a bit of guidance there when the business units are doing their business continuity planning. And I guess when they're doing that business continuity planning refresh, just a more emphasis on the business impact assessments up front.
Thanks, Aaron. Is there anything you want to add then about the other report as well over here? We'll just deal with both, and then we'll open up for questions.
Sure. The other report that's attached is the Contractor Health and Safety audits. So I just want to emphasise that this wasn't just a focus on service strikes. It was a wider contextual in terms of the whole health and safety contractor audit space. As Dan and Marie mentioned in their report, the Council Health and Safety team has done a lot of good improvements in this area. And with the implementation of the Aura system, there's now a checklist available to staff in a mobile format so they can access that in the field. And that checklist also drives consistency across the organisation. And also they've implemented the Contractor Handbook, which clearly sets out expectations of Council in terms of working with contractors in the health and safety space. There is an established process of monitoring the contractors' health and safety practices, as you'll see in the report with the attachments. But the reporting is only to the program steering group level. We would have thought the visibility of this work needs to be, at a summary level, come up to a higher level in terms of the exec and maybe this committee. And we think the reporting should be more than just the notifiables, because that doesn't provide a whole context in terms of all the work that Council's doing in this area. And it'll also allow officers to demonstrate that they're meeting their due diligence requirements under the Health and Safety Act.
That's helpful, thank you.
Open the floor to questions.
Appreciate that. So, Rob, you're first, please.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Karen, for those questions on the internal audit around Morva. I'll probably raise some topics in debate on that. But just a question around the contractor audit report and the need for contractors to hold adequate and relevant insurance. And I note you covered that off in page 121 of our report. Are you satisfied that management does appropriate due diligence on the type of insurance and the level of cover that's commensurate with the contract value and the type of work that's being undertaken? And I'm asking that question in the situations where things ultimately go wrong and we're looking to do remedial work, the council is looking to do. And I know it's not specifically on health and safety, but it does also cover off some health and safety issues.
Yeah, I didn't cover that specific point in this piece of work. It was more concentrated on the audit side of things, but obviously council has got in its procurement process the requirement for a certain level of cover.
Yep.
And I'm assuming that
That's done there.
that's done.
So have you done an audit on that, or is that in the audit plan going forward?
I don't believe it's in the audit plan going forward that I know of.
Okay, okay. All right, thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Rob. Jodie?
Kia ora, my question's in relation to page 16, I think, of the report, and page 113 of board books. It's to do with the business continuity management capability. And the question's probably more so for David, which is, were you surprised at the maturity rating being at the level of repeatable? And then do we have enough capacity and capability to address the recommendations coming out of the report? Kia ora.
I was mildly surprised, but I understand the perspective PwC have taken in terms of we have a lot of people at council that wear cloaks and can do heroic things, and we have a great culture at council and we can actually get the job done. But when it comes down to codifying exactly how we go about that, I do acknowledge that we can do a much better job. So it doesn't rely heavily on individuals. I accept the rating. I feel comfortable with our ability to deal with a situation because of the individuals, but I feel uncomfortable that we haven't codified it, and so if those individuals were hit by a bus, so to speak, we wouldn't be responding as well. In terms of resources, yes, I think we've matured in the risk management space. It takes engagement in the risk sort of culture of the existing staff to actually make these moves, and so I think we're in a space where we can embrace the recommendations and get after them.
Thank you, Jodie. Now it's Karen, then Ewan. Oh, and then Paula. Thank you. Karen? Yes,
I was on mute. Jaylene, you stole my question this time. Yeah, I think that was the one thing that stood out to me from that report is a maturity rating of 2 out of 5. And given the sort of lifeline nature of this organisation, I would anticipate that our community would expect more resilience than that. So it's good to see this work being done and management's support of those recommendations and the answer to the resourcing question, which is, of course, the really important one as well, if we're going to shift the dial on that. I guess just one aspect of that, just one further question, what is the aspiration for maturity? What level?
It's probably you, David. Sorry.
I'm not sure I can answer that. I'm focused on the journey forward. The maturity rating has an associated investment and focus, and what we need to do is make sure that our aspiration is to be at the ready, able to respond to any incident that we could foresee. So I suppose that would have to be my answer.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question is it's, really important to ask that question at the beginning of the journey, before setting the roadmap, because, you're using public funds, you can't afford to gold plate everything, and you need to get the bang for your buck. And so, focusing on a maturity level that will ensure enough resilience without expending too much resource, I guess, is the balance. And so having a really good understanding of what is your aspiration before you set that roadmap, I think is really important. So I'll leave that there. And I just had one question on the contract management, the health, safety and wellness contractor audit. Firstly, I'd say it was good to see the recommendation around the the more fulsome reporting on a quarterly basis. That's great. And I would just note the recommendation of the project managers performing the audits and, linking that to their KPIs. That in itself, I think, is a great recommendation, but it really needs to be supported with good, robust training and a just culture, so that those managers actually feel supported in taking on that process. So is anybody able to comment on whether that's been factored in? Or am I jumping the gun there on that recommendation?
Dan, Marie, I think I see your hands up down there. Can you just come to a microphone so Kieran can hear the answer, please?
With the launch or the rebuild of Aura and the launch out on the 6th of July, the whole intent and purpose, Kieran, is data in, data out for reporting, a much better oversight in terms of contractor reporting. We've built a module called Audit Templates or Inspection Templates, and they're specifically for everyone within council, no matter what business unit you are, or those project managers, to be able to utilise those out in the field as well with the mobile app, so it's really easy to use. And training along with the Aura training is giving that out to participants to be able to get that training and to understand it, so it's nice and easy.
Yeah, it's one thing to have a template, it's another to have confidence to go out onto site and actually fill that template out in a authentic and valuable way.
Exactly, and our business partners will be getting out into the field and making sure that that is being monitored and assisting and making sure that people can and are using it correctly. And if they have any questions, it's about advising and supporting them in that space.
Yeah, great. And I noticed there was a comment about the lack of mobile devices to use Aura. Is that not something that can be downloaded onto personal devices, phones and things, or do they need to carry a separate device around with them?
No, the mobile app can be loaded onto any device in terms of that respect. I guess it's a case of whether people who aren't supplied with a phone are willing and want to do that. What I do know, and Murray Hickey and his team are probably in a better position to answer this, is that there are notepads or books going out to our business sites to make it easier for our people without devices to come into the depots and log in events as well. So I know there's work being done on in that space.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kieran. Ewan, thank you for waiting.
No problem, Mr Chair. Look, I'm actually not a member of the committee, and so I'll leave my questions for another day. Mayor Paul.
Sure. You're welcome. I'm always glad you're here, Ewan, so you're welcome to ask your questions you really wanted to. Paula.
Questions might have been good and answered, I'm just in terms of seamless service, lifting our game, with the work that's been done with the transformation team, business transformation through Murray, etc. I don't know if he's here. Is that one way we're going to address any small deficits that are required to bring us up to a high-functioning, high-grade organisation? I know we've done the data stuff, Lance, and you and I have spoken about it, but I'm not sure that everyone around here understands what else is in the pipeline for digital transformation that's going to make us communicate and work with the community faster and more efficiently?
Well, in relation to business continuity management, in my view, it's more of a culture and leadership opportunity in moving that forward to around the maturity levels. Yes, technology will help with that, but it's really around now that we're at the back end of, well, sort of at the back end of the pandemic, and we've got staff coming back on board, then I think we'll have plenty of time to actually, really go to what the Chair's question was around what's our aspiration, in my view, would be that using technology and part of our transformation of the organisation, using leadership and knowledge across the organisation, then and thinking of Three Waters reform, if that finally happens, then our aspiration should be level 3, and after Three Waters is level 4 as things settle down. So hopefully that's answered your question and probably the Chair's previous question as well. But yes, the answer is yes. It will be part of the transformation program around making sure that business continuity management is a key part of that, and making sure that we're delivering on our promise to the community.
Yeah, I guess where I'm talking from, because I'm aware that culture goes so far, but what we found in a pandemic, the question is, what we found in a pandemic is you have an uncertain staff force, if that's what you want to call it. So people are unwell, or they go to another organisation. All of that's happened, and then a new person has to go back over all this stuff back to base and find out what that other person has been doing to catch up sometimes. And I'm wondering, I understand the second tranche of improvements through the transformation team is to look at how you have processes in place so anybody can jump on and come in at that point in the process rather than review that point in the process. So that's why I asked the question. Have you got a comment on that, Lance?
Yeah, no, that's part of it. You're on the money there. But it's also about our onboarding, and then when you're doing the onboarding and the induction of new people, is actually having the right tools so you can do that. Because of this, in business continuity, it's not just you do it once and it's there, because you have to review it all the time and actually update it, because circumstances change, there's learnings, we get better as we go along. If you can actually capture that in a way where it's easier for people who are coming into the organisation to be onboarded and then actually be able to use that tool, then it makes things easier, and you do get the continuity from staff to staff member.
Yeah, it's a question over here then. In terms of work that you do for others, what are the factors that you do think would take us up to that next level?
Maybe, and it sort of follows on from sort of what Lance's message was. Where you see really good business continuity working is when it doesn't sit on a piece of paper or with some key individuals. It's actually just part of the business and the way it thinks and the way it operates. And so if you sort of look at the journey that the council's taken in this last term around, now you've got a great oversight and view of your risks and your exposures and ranking of those. You're now starting to report against those and monitor them and track them. The next level is going, how do we share that and get the organisation understanding and all the people understanding that, because you are very unique compared to other organisations where your senior team might be called off for civil defence emergency and have to deal with an emergency at the council, and so you can't have that risk ownership only sitting at the top level. It needs to be ingrained in everything you do, and so it does come to culture, leadership, onboarding, and how these things are actually discussed in your day-to-day decision-making and activities, and that is where you get the big bang, is when it becomes BAU and actually the bit of paper that you write it on to help you get there becomes irrelevant because everyone just lives and breathes it.
Yeah, so thank you.
I understand we might have a staff member able to talk to the transformation question that you've raised, Paula. I wonder, DJ, I wonder if he wanted to speak now, or is he gone?
Oh yeah, there's on stream there, yeah.
Hello, thank you everyone. Yes, look, really good questions, especially what can we be doing to pick up where one person was, or to collaborate more as a team. So we've got a number of strategic initiatives underway in terms of refining our strategies in the digital space, and one of those is the digital workforce. So that'll be coming up fairly soon. But already we've seen Teams enablement, and everybody's using it to a certain extent. So it's really a case of leveraging that and utilising other kind of initiatives that we can do. And yes, Julie and the transformation team are doing some great work in terms of connecting with the business and lifting up our our organisational digital maturity. So yeah, lots of good things happening. So hopefully we'll be able to share more of those coming forward.
Thank you, DJ. Appreciate that. Ewan, I think we've encouraged you to ask your question.
Yeah, look, thank you. My question relates back to the internal audit function. And my question really is to David, the General Manager. I recall sort of 2001 through to 2007, we used to have an individual who would sit aside from the overall organisation, but I think it was a gentleman at the time, was the internal auditor, and his role was specifically to do financial audits of council units / departments, and that he would report directly to the CEO. So he stood outside the day-to-day, the council sort of hierarchy, and he had this direct report. And it gave us as elected members some confidence that there was this sort of independent individual analysing the business units. My question to you is, does that still occur?
So we've probably evolved a lot since then, in the sense that the resourcing in the finance team enables finance business partners within the finance team who are independent from other business units to actually do reviews of the finances for the different units, and the finance team put together the financial reporting that comes through to the finance committee. The chief executive has regular meetings with members of the finance team in terms of understanding the variances and some of the detail that the finance team come across, and so that independence, in my view, remains, because if you like, that function sits outside the actual council activities of each of the business units and what they do. So not influenced by the business unit manager, if that makes sense.
Right. And final question, just in terms of...
Sorry, Councillor, could I just add to that answer that effectively that's what Morva's role was, somebody that stood independent to review, and to audit internally. So I just can't remember exactly what her reporting lines were, but she was independent in nature.
Yes, and I guess the point is it's changed, although it's currently just going to be a trial, and we've lost that.
Yeah.
And I think I sensed from your question a level of concern, and I guess I'm also highlighting a level of concern. My final question is in regards to the contract by PwC, and whether or not you believe as management we're getting value for money there versus, having... so I guess you're saying is that we couldn't deliver those functions internally, that you feel that this is the best means for providing that audit function?
Thanks for the question. So so I'll answer that question, but stepping back to the previous concern, I don't share that it's a concern, because Morva's role was not to review the detailed financials. Her role was to engage in internal audits, of which the Strategic Risk and Assurance Committee identified as an area they would like investigation. So she was not overseeing the finances. That's the role of the finance team. Obviously, we have Audit New Zealand that comes in and does checks on materiality, as well as some of the assignments that we specifically get PwC to undertake, which is independent. So I think we're in really good shape in terms of transparency. So I would, it's my role to push back a bit on the concern to say I think that we're in good shape. It is a trial, Tracy just mentioned, that's more of a workload thing. But the oversight of PwC or the internal auditors, if you like, will always remain. So when I answer your second question, Yes, I believe we get value for money from PwC. I think independence and that external lens across the council is really valuable. We, as signalled to the Finance Committee last Finance Committee, that the contract with PwC comes up for renewal mid-next year, and council will continue to seek representation from external firms, and we'll just go to market to determine who that might be. Yeah, lots of value, and happy to continue with that model.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, and thank you for your question, Ewan. I'm glad you did. So look, I want to try and bring this to a conclusion, because it's actually showing the real bite of internal audit if we do it right, and I think our concerns are we do it right. Can I just ask a question, because the one remaining page in your report, Aaron, is in fact the work program. Tracy, when do we do the annual review of the internal audit work program and indeed the internal audit charter? Can you just refresh my memory, please?
We did it just before June, so I think we sort of did it. So it's it's kind of a workshop with ELT, and then with this committee, we brought a draft work program towards, and then we've obviously done the final. What Aaron and the team are bringing today is because we've now combined. Obviously, we did. Going forward into this year, have two separate work programs with Morvers and PwC, so we've just shuffled those around, and it is a working document, so again it was looking at what the business is capable of doing from that work program. So it's and we have always in the whole time that I've been here, it is a live document.
So in effect, our trial lasts until we next refresh the internal audit charter and program, which is going to be mid next year. Is that correct?
That's what I would like to do. Yes.
Well, look, I'd like to just perhaps try and wrap this up and thank members for their engagement in this. Tracy, I would like to suggest that actually, whether intended or not, I think this committee would be very interested to understand the result of the trial. So I would ask that at the appropriate stage next year, that the result, a formal paper with the results of the trial, be brought back, because I think there are some subsequent discussions that come with that. And I would like to reflect that there are two questions which I have heard members consistently raise. One is the doability. It's can we do it and can we make it work? And I'd want to endorse my colleague's point about independence, because actually it's about independence of work, but actually who you report to. And whoever is doing the work as the internal auditor should have a direct line to Kieran as chair of the committee. And I'd like to know, does a finance member have that ability? If that is not in place, we do not have independence. So I'd like that to be considered as far as that's concerned. And then it also, if I could just add, I think we've had quite significant, this is the real bite of internal audits, one around PCP, where actually the result is not where any of us in this room, whether that's elected members or management, want to be at. So I'd like to reflect on that program, what should be the follow-up on this? Is it just that we monitor the recommendations or not? I'd like you to consider that one, Tracy. And the other thing that would have been the only question or comment I would have made was, I noticed the exclusion from the scope of the health and safety was the effectiveness of the controls. My presumption is that as we go through the process that, Marie, you have outlined in terms of our development of the Safety Plus and the reviews, when we have an external review at some point, and I think you again indicated mid-next year, I would presume at that point the effectiveness of these controls would be also tested. Those are matters which are of dear, I think, I mean, if I can put I'm sentimentalising it, I think those are matters that are of interest and concern to this committee, particularly if we're going to progress with our internal audit program. So I'd like to just leave that as some comments to lie on the table and for management to consider those. But again, I'd like to thank the committee for strong engagement in it. And indeed, can I say to PwC and indeed to Hamilton, for actually doing some darn good internal audit work. It raises some very good questions, which has been helpful. Can I move us back to page 130? Page 94, where we have the proposed resolution that we receive the report. I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a second to thank you, Jadine? I appreciate that. Is there any discussion on the motion? Yes, Rob.
I would just briefly like to speak in debate, and it follows on to some extent from the comments that you've made, along with those comments around this internal audit function. I think the internal audit function that might from time to time assist PwC, but certainly this committee is essential for an organisation like Hamilton City Council, which is involved in a diversity of activities. And, you know, I'm speaking here from a nuts and bolts situation. I did use the matter of the insurance as an example, and I know in my 9 years of sitting around this table, we've seen instances where we've let contracts out, and some of those contracts have failed, and when we've gone back to the contractor and said, we want some money back from you because we have to remediate it, the contractor didn't have the type of insurance that was necessary to fund that back, so we paid twice for it. So I think going forward, this committee needs to engage with management to reinstate a model, whether it's the same one that we had with Morva or a slightly amended model, so that we can deal with some of those nuts and bolts, like the insurance and some of the more mundane items which do have significant or can have significant financial effects to us. I've seen this working in other organisations, and I've seen it produce quite significant results. And I do like the idea of it being an independent person, to the extent that it would be the line of communication would be back through to the chair of this committee, or whatever that iteration might be in terms of the next triennium. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate that. Any other comments on the motion simply that we receive? I think, Jadine, you seconded that for me. Thank you. Can I put the motion? All those in favour, please raise their hands. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for that. I still haven't got to the end of my open agenda item, but I am going to ask that we take a break now. I'm going to ask that it actually only be 10 minutes, and we're back at 11:15, please. But understand for members there's some morning tea available. So I'll adjourn the meeting till 11:15. Thank you. Thank you for that. We're getting there.